Hey guys, welcome back to another DIY video. Today I'm sharing with you some of my favorite farmhouse DIYs that I've done from the past. Some of these are a little bit older, so perhaps you haven't seen them, but they are some budget-friendly, easy farmhouse DIYs. I've got some reversible and interchangeable DIYs, some that are multi-seasonal, so lots of fun DIYs. I hope that you enjoy this. If you do, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Keep in mind that these have been pulled from previous videos, so sometimes I say over and over again the first DIY, and that is why. But I hope you enjoy this video. Without anything further, let's get into it. All right, now to do this, the next one, I picked up 6 of the 8x10 canvases from the Dollar Tree, and for this project I decided to use the Gorilla wood glue. You could use a different glue if you wanted to. I'm going to start by cutting off the canvas on each of these, and don't worry, I'm not going to show you me doing all 6 of these. This was a little bit time consuming. I don't know, not like bad. I don't know if I was doing it the best way possible or if it's just a time-consuming thing. But I like doing crafts because they're kind of relaxing and calming to me, so that doesn't bother me. And I'm just taking a blade and I'm cutting on the outside of the staples, and we're just going to cut off the canvas. I did save all these canvases. I'm not sure if I'm going to use them all in projects in the future, but I know they could be used, so I did save them. And then I am just ripping off what is left there around the staples. In this project, we're not going to be taking off the staples, but I suppose you could if you wanted to. It just seemed not worth the effort to me. So I grabbed my crafting tablecloth and folded it up several times so I don't destroy my table. And I'm using a hammer to just hammer in all of the staples. Most of them are on one side, and then there is a couple on the other side. And then I'm taking the sanding block and we're going to sand this down the best we can on all sides. It's not going to be perfect, but that's okay, because did I already say what we're making? We're making a window frame. You probably could have guessed that. And it doesn't need to be completely perfect. Now note that they are not going to all be exactly the same size. So try to find ones in the store that are the same size and then maneuver them around until you get what seems to be the best fit. Now I'm taking Gorilla Glue and just obviously attaching each of them together. Now I was going to use my little clamps from the Dollar Tree to hold these pieces together while they dried, but they weren't quite big enough for this. So just make sure when you are gluing them together that you at least make sure the sides that are all going to be connected are lined up. It's okay if the outside ones aren't. So I'm just taking painter's tape and wrapping that around while this dries. I think the Gorilla Glue takes about 20 to 30 minutes, so I did give this ample amount of time in between, and that's what I would recommend as well. So we're just going to glue and cover with painter's tape. If you are enjoying this video, I would love it if you would give it a thumbs up. That really does help me out. I hope that you are enjoying these. As you can see here, I decided to go over the seams where I was attaching the set of 3 with some popsicle sticks, so I'm gluing them down as well. And we're going to use painter's tape once again, and then I decided I might as well use those big popsicle sticks on all of the seams, so I did do that. I'm not sure if it was completely necessary, but I will say that my frame did seem pretty sturdy in the end, so it was not a bad idea. Alright, so everything is glued, holding together well, and we're going to paint it. I was debating on what to do. I think I'm going to try doing something with the antique wax, so that's what we're going to go with, and if I change my mind, I'll paint over it. For me, the beauty of DIYs is that you can do it however you want to match your decor, and if you start on something and you don't like it, you can change it. That was kind of what I went to this project thinking, but I ended up really liking how the antique wax looked, so I'm just brushing it on and wiping it off with a paper towel. And once again, just make sure that you get all of the sides, the edges. I did everything but the back, so the inside edge, outside edge, just make sure that you get it all really well. And I ended up really liking how this came out. If you are new here, I would love it if you would consider subscribing to my channel so that you don't miss out on my future videos. Just hit the subscribe button, and then when a bell pops up next to it, make sure to turn the notification bell on to all. Otherwise, you still may not see my videos even if you have subscribed, because YouTube's weird like that sometimes. Alright, now we are going to decorate this little frame with a wreath, and I have that wreath from Dollar Tree. It was a little bit, not quite a circle, but I was trying to make it closer to a circle by bending it. Plus, once we put this greenery on, That will help as well. And this greenery is also from the Dollar Tree. They've had a lot of really nice stuff this year. And then I'm going to use some burlap ribbon that is also from the Dollar Tree to hang it up. So I just kind of have it looped there to place it while I messed with the wreath so that I kind of had an idea of what it would look like. You're going to see a few times where I pull this out of frame a little bit because I keep holding it up just to kind of get a look as to what it's going to look like when it's, you know, standing up. So, and I used a little bit of floral wire to attach the greenery at a couple places just so that it wouldn't be flying off too much. But for the most part, I just trimmed the stems down short and stuck it in. I think it's called a grapevine wreath, if I'm correct. And it just kind of gets stuck in there. And I don't think anything is going to fall off. I've done that before with other wreaths. So you could use hot glue if you wanted. You could use more floral wire if you needed. But I'm not looking for it to be all super close. I wanted it kind of sticking off the edges. And this worked and gave me the look I was going for. Once again, sorry, I keep pulling it up off the frame, just needing to get a look at what it looked like. I ended up using 3 picks from the Dollar Tree all together, and that ended up being adequate. I used every bit of it, but it ended up being completely adequate. So once this is all done, I am just gluing the burlap wreath to the top of the frame with some hot glue. And I was really excited with how this piece came out. Once again, I just have it leaning up so you can look at it. I believe I'm going to put this in my guest bedroom over one of the beds because I think it would look nice since I don't have a headboard. So that's my thought, but I love how this came out, and it really was easy to do. To get started, I've got these little houses from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to use 2 of them, and they are in the like home decor aisle. I have seen them in the past, and I just recently picked these up, so they were not a one and done, which I'm glad. I hope they continue bringing them back. Anyways, I am going to take off the embellishments, and they come off pretty easily. It's just on with some hot glue. I'm scraping it off, and then I'm going to sand everything down to smooth it out. It is not wood. It's like a thick MDF board, but it cleans up pretty easily. So for the first one, I'm going to just paint all of the edges in black paint. I am using the color ink from Waverly chalk paint. Obviously, you can do these in any way you want. I just wanted to give you a few different ideas of ways to style them. Once my paint is dry, we're going to cover the side that had the embellishments just because I'm just doing it because I know that nothing will be seen through this paper. This is some paper that I have from Hobby Lobby. I think I bought a whole pack of this. So when you get that 50% off, it's a pretty good deal. And I just traced it out, and we're going to cut it out and attach it. I'm going to choose to use a Gorilla glue stick. You could use other things. Now this paper is pretty thick, so it's like a little thicker than other like scrapbooking paper. But anyways, use any adhesive that you want that you find works well for you. You could even just use a hot glue gun along the edges. So smooth that out, and now I've got some music. I'm choosing to use the song Away in a Manger. Don't totally freak out on me for ripping these pages out. This is an old hymnal. It's not like vintage, but it's older, and I have it in my stash for the purpose of crafting with it. So I know some people might have a problem with that. You can also print off, like find a free printable on on the internet that you can print off. But I just kind of pressed out the edges so I knew exactly where I wanted to place it, because the Gorilla Glue stick is pretty sticky and it's hard to move once you place stuff down, especially with something thin like this music paper. So I let that dry, and then I'm just using a sanding block to trim off like all of the edges, to clean up all of the edges. And I try to do this on the other side as well, but like I said, that cardstock is pretty thick, so it didn't work super great, but it did ultimately. But my sanding block was not rough enough, so I grabbed some other sandpaper and wrapped it around it. I also thought about just flipping it over and like cutting it with a sharp cutting tool, but anyways, do however you want to do. I think roughed up the edges a little bit, like the black edges that I had painted, just to make sure it was a little bit, not perfect. And then we're going to give everything, both sides and the edges of the, so both sides of the paper and the edges of the paint, a nice coat of Mod Podge. I like to Mod Podge pretty much everything because I just feel like it seals it in. Now, I didn't show you wrapping this with twine, and I'm attaching a bow. That's I'll show you how I do that on the next house. I filmed this part out of order and didn't realize it till afterwards. Anyways, then on the side with Away in a Manger, I'm just pulling out these little wooden stickers. They're from the Dollar Tree, but I had them in my stash from the past, and I put a gold star on, and then I decided to put a little coat of Mod Podge just to keep the glitter from going everywhere. So moving on to the next one, I'm painting the edges of this one with white Waverly chalk paint. I still only had to do a one coat, but I was trying to not get it all over all of the sides because I wasn't for sure where I was going with these, so I tried to stay nice and neat. I did paint one side with the white, and then I decided to cover it up, but I'm so glad I painted it just to make sure nothing would come through. This is more scrapbook paper I have on hand. It's not as thick as the last cardstock stuff. You buy these by the sheet at Hobby Lobby. Trace it out and glue that on, and then I'm going to paint off the edge with, or tape off the edge with my painter's tape because we're going to paint the back side. Like I said, I wasn't totally sure in the beginning where I was going with all of these, so I'm going to give this one coat of the ink paint from Waverly once again to have this side a nice solid black. Once again, once that is all dry, the paint and the paper, you want the paper glue to be dry before you use this sanding technique. I'm sanding off the edges because obviously I didn't trim it exactly, so there was a little bit of extra, and then I'm also going in and sanding down the edges to just kind of make them not look super perfect and kind of sand off any little black paint that had leaked, so to speak. And then I'm going back over the whole thing with Mod Podge once again. There was a little paper that wasn't fully glued down, so I stuck some Mod Podge under that as well. We're just going to get this whole thing sealed in. And then to embellish this one, this is what I did with the last one too. I just didn't show you. I am just using twine. I just cut it with wire cutters because that's what I had closest to me. And I'm burning it off to get off any fuzzies. You see here, fire kind of travels when it's all bunched up. Nobody was harmed in the making of this, but it helps if you stretch it out and don't like burn it as it's all curled up, because that's when the fire will travel. Anyways, I'm going to just wrap that around multiple times. I'm not keeping it super even, but I am only covering a small space on the house, but you can do this however you want or not do it at all. And once I have it wrapped around, I'm just going to tie it on one side, and on this one we're going to make little twine bows, and we're going to hot glue them on both sides. I am just putting them in enough and making sure the tails don't stick over the edge so that when you're looking at it from one side you can't see the embellishment on the other side. So I hope that that makes sense. If you notice on the, well, on the last one, I only did the bow on one side and then I did a star on the other. I'm sure you did notice that because I showed you and talked to you about it. And then but this one I'm putting the bow on both sides. So just wanting to make sure you can't see it from the opposite side. Sorry, I got tongue-tied. Now this was just a raw piece of wood. It was little in their crafter square area at Dollar Tree. I was excited to find them. I picked up a couple of them. Now the wedges are definitely rough on these ones, so give them a good sanding. And then I'm going to go in with the antique wax. Now the edges, you know, you paint on the antique wax and then wipe it off. And sorry, this whole thing is not in frame. I had some struggles when I was doing this, and I was doing the painting portion on each of these. It wasn't all totally in frame. But on the edges, when you wipe it off, it definitely stayed pretty thick. But the fronts of it, it kind of gave the look that I was expecting it. But it was okay with how it came out on the edges. And I think it's just because they were so raw and rough that it just absorbed it differently. So we're going to antique wax this whole thing. And then we're going to go ahead and embellish this one. So I have these white stickers that I think were from Hobby Lobby on clearance, and then I showed you a little stencil that I had from Dollar Tree. You could use just stencils if you don't have stickers, but I'm just showing you what I'm using and trying to give you a variety of ideas. So I'm going to spell out home, and I'm not pushing the stickers all the way down because I wasn't sure if I was going to have to move them, and I did, and thankfully they moved pretty good on this antique wax, so that was not a problem. I'm pulling out the heart on this stencil and using that for the O. So I'm right now just figuring out placement, and then we're going to stencil with just some white Waverly chalk paint. The key is to not have too much paint on your little pouncer brush to make sure you don't have any bleed through, and it came out pretty good. I just had to move the letters a little bit once that was done, and so that's what I did. Then I have the stencil also from the Dollar Tree, and I don't want to use the writing in the middle of it. I just want to use the wreath, so we're taping that off. And then we're going to place that, and once again use some white paint to stencil on the little wreath above home. And like I said, you could do this with anything you wanted. You could do this whole stencil, do one of the wreaths with the writing on it. You could just use one of the word stencils from the last one. However you want to do that works. Now we're going to go to the other side and we're going to make this one all cutesy for Christmas. I have this stencil from the Dollar Tree from last year, I think. And I'm just going to try to tape this down. I'm trying to tape it, but there's not a lot of place for the tape to stick to the design underneath because there's so many stencils on it. So taped it best I could, and then I'm holding it down. And I'm just using some acrylic paint. I think they're actually both called Holiday Green and Holiday Red, but use whatever you've got. And I'm just using, once again, my pouncer brush, really trying to make sure I don't have too much paint on it, and being careful up here because I'm going to do the wreath green and the bow red. Very traditional. I like traditional when it comes to Christmas. It's just kind of my thing. And that's it for that side. Once again, we're going to give everything a coat of Mod Podge, and I'm going to show you at the very end how everything looks all finished. I'm going to show you both sides of everything, so just hang tight for that. Now this last one is not a wood house. This is something I picked up on clearance from Hobby Lobby. It was originally $17.99 and I picked it up when it was like under $2. It was $1.79 or $1.49, something like that. And I wanted to DIY it, so I kept my eye on it when it was on clearance and snagged it once it got that low. Once again, sorry this whole thing is not totally in frame. But I know that not everyone's going to have one of these, but I just wanted to give you some other ideas and just give you, if you find something at a thrift store or on clearance that, there's different ways you can make it over. So I'm just going to give this a couple coats of paint. I'm using white Waverly chalk paint. Make sure that you let it dry in between coats. We're painting on metal here. So once I have a couple of coats and it's nice and dry, I'm going to sand down. I'm doing a lot of the edges and corners. I do a little bit on the flat parts, but I focus mainly on the edges and corners to just bring a little bit of that darker metal out, just to kind of, make it, to make it look a little bit older and not crisp and clean, and also because the paint didn't look all crisp and clean. This wasn't a flat piece. There was little dents in it and stuff. So rather than try to fight that, I just kind of embraced it. So painted it, sanded it. We're going to Mod Podge it just because I don't want the paint to chip off of this little metal house. And like I said, this is a metal house, so we are going to make a wreath, but this would be something that could be changeable, that you can just make different types of wreaths for. So right now, I just chose this red berry garland from the Dollar Tree. If I had the orange one, I would have made a fall wreath, but I don't. So I'm going to just do this, but you could also use some like pretty greenery for like an everyday one, or you could use the Christmas greenery for a green Christmas wreath. Anyways, I wrapped it around, got the size I wanted, and just kind of twisted it around itself because it is actually a wire center. And then I'm pulling out one of these magnets from Dollar Tree, and I'm actually going to paint it because it's not going to fully be covered by the wreath. So I'm going to paint it and then Mod Podge it, which I didn't show you here. And I am hot gluing this on there, even though the wreath itself does have some metal in it. I wanted to make sure it stayed on. So here's a look at all of the houses. I just love how they came out. I like that they are reversible, and the big one, of course, is also just changeable with the wreath. And here is what the other sides look like. It'll be so fun to just tuck into decor, add on onto your tray. You could style them together as a set, but so fun to work with. So for this first one, I have this little heart tabletop decor from Dollar Tree, and I just sanded it down really good to get a rougher surface so that the shiny stuff wouldn't come through. And now we're going to go in with some fabric paint. This is from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to draw on some little swirlies. I probably should have practiced this on a piece of paper first, but I didn't. So they're not perfect, but I still love how it came out. So you're just going to put your design on your surface. It does take quite a while for the fabric paint to dry, especially if you have some thicker spots of the puffy paint or fabric paint. You can also use puffy paint. Fabric paint pretty much works the same way. So here it is, and I'm just going to let that dry for like 3 or 4 hours. And now I'm going in with some Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and we're going to paint over the whole thing. I do a couple of coats. I do dry it in between. I used my dryer. I ended up doing 2 coats just to make sure I had a good coating or good coverage of paint. You couldn't see anything through it. I do also do the edges and the back of the piece
just so that it was all matching. The edges are white, but I wanted it to be the same white. And I painted the back just in case you saw it later. And now I'm going in with some Waverly chalk paint in the color Celery and a stencil brush and wiping a lot of that off, doing a dry brush. And we're just going to go over the pattern to try to highlight that. In the spring, and actually kind of just my everyday decor, I use a lot of greens. The celery and moss colors from Waverly chalk paint are common themes in my decor, so I just kind of went with that because I thought it would go well with my decor. This is a very pretty like shelf piece or even a tiered tray. And then I'm trying to wrap some twine around this, and I do this in the most awkward way possible because I was trying to make it so that you guys could see it. So eventually I give up and I'm like, forget it. I'm just wrapping it around a couple of times and tying a bow. I did not hot glue this. Of course, feel free to do so if you want. Eventually I turn this around towards me so that I can tie a bow that looks appropriate. So yeah, that is all there is to this cute little decor piece. I absolutely love how it came out. Oh, that's right. I also get my lighter and burn off all of the fuzzies. Typically I do that before I put it on. I don't know if it was smart to I don't know, do it like this, but I did it like this. It just gets all those extra little hairs off. Anyways, that is it for this one. I really love how it came out. I think it's really cute, and you really don't notice that the swirls aren't that perfect. It's like less noticeable than I thought it would be. So I was very pleased with how this came out. So for this next one, I have this cute little sign from the Dollar Tree, and once again, I sanded it. I actually pulled off a lot of the paper and just smoothed it out best I could. Because this was a little bit rough, I mean, I smoothed it out pretty good, but there was definitely different layers kind of in the surface. So I just mixed some Waverly chalk paint in the color white with some baking soda to do that like textured paint and gave this a good solid coat. It's not like super noticeable, but it definitely disguised any imperfections underneath. So while that's drying, I'm going to take these little grapevine hearts and some moss from both from the Dollar Tree, but I'm just going to hot glue all the way around, placing this moss. And don't worry about going too heavy on it. We're going to trim this up, kind of clean it up afterwards. So I'm just using a liberal amount of hot glue, trying to not burn myself as I pat it down and working my way around the wreath. I guess it's not a wreath, but working my way around the heart. And then I'm going in with these little shears, little scissors from the Dollar Tree, but you could use your regular size ones as well. And we're just trimming the heck out of it. We're going to trim all of the sides down and the top and just try to get it back into a heart-shaped form. And then I use kind of what I trimmed off to finish up the piece and to fill in any gaps. If you are enjoying this video, if you love budget-friendly, easy DIYs, please consider subscribing before you leave, and also give this video a thumbs up if you are enjoying it. That helps me out so much, and subscribing just makes sure that you get to know when I post other videos, so why not do it? Now that it's all trimmed up, I'm going to put a decent amount of hot glue on the back of our little grapevine heart wreath thing and flip that over and attach it. And then I did decide to go in with some Waverly wax in the color Antique, and with a small paintbrush just go over the roof line. I just kind of wanted to make it pop a little bit more, so I'm just brushing a little bit of that on and then wiping it off with a paper towel. And I liked the overall look that this gave. I thought about adding like a bow or something else to this piece, but I really just kind of like the simplicity of it. So that's all I did for it. I really love how this piece came out, that it's super cute. This might be a little too big for my tiered tray, but it'll definitely be cute on a shelf somewhere. So for this first DIY, I have one of these wooden houses from the Dollar Tree, just scrap wood that kind of looks like a house, and I had it sanded down. I took off the sticker on it, and I'm going to start by using my antique wax all over this whole thing, brushing it on and wiping it off. We're just going to cover the whole thing, and then we're going to be painting some of this as well, but I wanted this as the base. So once my antique wax was dry, we're going to cover the front and the back. We're making a double-sided house here. We're making it reversible, and I'm just covering it with some Waverly chalk paint in the color white. I will be doing up to the top, but I just needed a place to hold it. So we're going to do one coat. That's a pretty good coat, but it's not necessarily full coverage. So once the white paint is fully dried, we're just going to sand it. I'm sanding down the edges to take off any paint that may have slipped over, and then I just kind of roughed it up a little bit, sanded down the edges, and wiped it clean with a paper towel. Now first I took these stickers that I love from Dollar Tree, and I was going to put a bunch of them on, kind of like when you use a rub-on transfer and do like the whole sheet on it. And I was just like, I really don't like this. So the stickers actually peeled off pretty quickly, pretty easily because I didn't push them down real hard. And this is what I wound up with on one side. I have two of the hearts, and then I have this rub-on transfer word from Dollar Tree and the word home, and we're just going to apply that by just using my little scraper tool and then peeling that off. It goes on super easy. And then on the other side, I just left one of those stickers, love sticker with a little wreath. And then I've got this stencil from Dollar Tree, and I'm just using the wreath part of it, not the words in the center, and putting like a border around the sticker, and I'm using Waverly chalk paint in the color moss. And now I'm going in with some Mod Podge, and I will admit I didn't actually, for some reason I wasn't thinking and didn't really wait for this to fully dry. So I have one little spot that's smeared, but you really can't notice it in the end. And I'm just doing a coat of Mod Podge to keep the stickers on, the paint on, keep things from chipping, all that. And I really love how this came out. I think it's super cute. It'll be perfect in a tiered tray or just a little kind of filler piece for a shelf. And I can display it either way. On a tiered tray, it's perfect because the tiered tray is seen from both sides. This has something on both sides. Anyways, love how that came out. So this next one, I'm taking these two wooden trays from Dollar Tree. I have had these in my stash forever. We're going to give them a coat of white paint. I am going to do all of the sides, not the bottom. I'm going to do the inside, but I'm going to skip the bottom and one end on each of them because we're going to attach them. I'm not worried about a super thick coat of paint here. Again, it's like a full coat, but not necessarily full coverage. And I didn't really probably need to do all of the inside, but I wanted to make sure that if I decided to style it differently, that it was just kind of completed. So that's what I did. And now I'm going in with some Gorilla wood glue as well as some hot glue, and we're going to glue the ends together, and I just used some clamps to hold it in place. The hot glue is going to hold it quickly. The wood glue is going to hold it more long term, but I did want to use the clamps to make sure that it was like I wanted the two pieces to fit together tightly. Sorry for the lighting here. You know, it is what it is. It gets better. And now I've got my family sign, and I'm just going to pull off the little hanging piece here from the back, and we're not going to paint this. We're just going to leave it as is. So now I'm just taking some wooden dowels from the Dollar Tree, and we're going to attach these. You'll see in the end, I end up taking a couple of them off, and I end up cutting some of them down and putting more of them on. I end up doing 4 of them across, and I started here by putting too much at the top, and I ended up taking it off and lowering it because I decided if it was seen, even though it's not going to be, it'll be unfinished from the back and the word will be backwards from the back, I didn't want it to look, I don't know, super funky. So I only wanted it to be at the very, very bottom of it. I got these dog nail clippers from the Dollar Tree. I'd heard that these were good for cutting stuff like this. It works, but I don't know. I'm not sure that I think it's better than, I don't know, other tools. But I kind of score it and twist it and then break it off. It worked, but I don't know that it's super great compared to other things I've used. Anyways, got them to the length. Actually, I trim them down again. I don't show you all this, but I hot glue it and put some hot glue around the edges just to make sure that it's in there really good. You could use some other adhesive if you want, but this worked good enough for me. Now we're going to cut our styrofoam piece that I have. This is like a floral foam. This is like the thicker white stuff. It's more dense than the green stuff, but you could probably use that too. And I'm just cutting it using a putty knife into pieces that will fit inside of my little wooden trays. And then we're going to take some hot glue and glue these pieces into the tray. It's not a very deep dish, so I did feel like I needed to hot glue the styrofoam to the bottom. Sometimes I don't, but in this case, I decided it would be better. And then I wanted to just give a little bit more texture and dimension to my tray here. So I'm using some apple barrel paint, I think it was elephant gray, and just dry brushing that on all of the outside surfaces. And I didn't want it to be just a flat white color. And now I'm just going to throw on some hot glue to the bottom of the dowels and get this centered and drop this down in, pushing it down. That the sign is very secure on the dowels. I didn't feel it move at all there. And now we're going to embellish. I have this greenery. This was a garland from Hobby Lobby that I guess had broke and fallen apart on them. So they just kind of sold it very discounted. I think it was less than $5 in a bag in their clearance section. And I've been just pulling pieces of it for various DIYs. But you could use some picks from the Dollar Tree or Walmart or just whatever you have on hand. But I'm just going to fuss with this, put this around. And I'm not even putting it into the styrofoam. This would be easily taken out, and I could add in different florals for different seasons. So this is also kind of a changeable for different seasons. You know, you're not stuck with one particular look, and you can switch it up if you want. And I absolutely love how this came out. All right, guys, so for this first one, we are going to take this sign from Hobby Lobby. I picked it up on clearance. I think it was under $2, but you could use just like a board you have on hand or a sign from the Dollar Tree, but this worked out perfect for me. I'm going to take off the sawtooth hanger and pull out any staples, and we're just going to clean this up a little bit. We're going to sand down the surface. We're going to sand down the holes from the staples, sand down where I took off the tag, because this side is actually going to be the front for this project. And once everything is sanded, we're going to fill in all the holes and gaps with lightweight spackling from Dollar Tree. Once that dries, you're going to sand it down again and smooth it out. All these steps may or may not be necessary depending on what you use for your base. And then we're going to give the front a coat of Waverly chalk paint in the color Elephant. And then we're going to go in with white. The dark color first just kind of helps cover up all this pattern and words. Even though this is going to be the back of the sign, I still want to make sure that it looks completed and finished. So now, once I've got all of my white paint on with all of the coverage I want, I think I did a couple of coats, I'm going in with some Apple Barrel acrylic paint in the color Burnt Umber, and you dry brush by just putting a little bit of paint on, wiping a lot of it off, and then just dry brushing to give like a distressed look. And now we're going to move on to our mason jar sign. This is from the Dollar Tree. It just comes off pretty easily here, although it does kind of go flying on me here. I took the screws out and then used the scraper tool, and there it went. But yeah, there was just a little bit of hot glue underneath there, which I'm scraping off, that was holding it on. You don't necessarily have to take this off, but I just think it's easier to work with when I'm not worrying about getting anything on that little piece there. So once again, we're going in with Waverly chalk paint in Elephant. Then we're going to go in with the color Celery from Waverly as well. But as I was doing this, I felt like the words were still coming through. So there you can see I like sanded it down a little bit, hoping that would help. So now I'm going in with Celery, and it just was still showing up. I could have peeled off the paper. I probably should have just sanded it better before I got started, but hindsight's always 20/20. So once I got going in this, you can see I could just still kind of see the writing. So I'm going in with that lightweight spackling, and I'm going to do a thin coat, just kind of pushing it in there, and it actually filled in. It was actually grooves. It wasn't raised. So I did that and then let that dry, sanded it off, and then gave it another coat of the color Celery, and it gave a completely finished look. So there's another tip and trick if you're having trouble with it. So now I'm going to just take off the little hanger on the back. I could have taken that off in the beginning, but I was actually using that to kind of hold my sign while I painted it, but I don't need it for this project. So we're going to take that off, and I'm saving that as well because you never know in the future. And now I'm taking some white stickers. These are from Hobby Lobby that I picked up on clearance a while ago, but you could use a rub-on transfer. You could do words, you could do a design, you could paint a different pattern on, but I'm just going to put on the word joy, and then I'm going in with that burnt umber again, and we're going to dry brush over the whole thing. Right now I'm going to emphasizing the edges, and then we're going to do the whole thing over the words, try to blend it all in a little bit more so that it's not looking like stickers. So that's kind of the point of this here. And now we're going to attach the metal top of what's supposed to be the top of the mason jar back on with these little screws, and then I'm going to go in with more of that burnt umber on top of the metal and just once again make that look kind of old and blend in with the rest of the sign. And then once it's completely dry, I do put some Mod Podge over the whole thing. I like using Mod Podge on my projects because I feel like it seals everything in. You don't have to worry about paint scraping off, especially on things like metal, but I pretty much do it on all of my projects. So once everything is dry, the sign, the mason jar, all of that, I'm taking these floral picks that I picked up from Dollar Tree, and we're just going to clip off a couple of sprigs, and you can usually move the flowers or leaves up and down on the stem and like reposition them to where you want them. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. And we're just making a little floral arrangement, holding it up to see, make sure it's how I like how it looks. Make sure I like how it looks. Got tongue-tied there. And now we're just going to use some hot glue, and I just keep putting the sign back over to make sure all of the florals are where I want them, putting some hot glue and then holding them in place kind of flat up against the sign until everything's how I want it, and then putting some hot glue on the bottom and the top. Because of the stems, they don't really, the whole mason jar does not lay flat, but I'm just putting a good amount on the top and bottom, placing that, trying to make sure it's somewhat centered, and that is all I did. Oh no, that's not true. I added a little bit more hot glue. You can't really see what I'm doing here, but I couldn't get a good angle. Just down in the top, just to make sure everything was secured nice and good. And I love how this sign came out. I think it's really cute, and I can't wait to decorate with it. For this next one, we're going to take this 4x4 frame from the Dollar Tree. I love this one. It is really cute. It's just plastic, but it looks like it's got this wood grain. I'm going to start by just painting this frame with some white Waverly chalk paint. I'm kind of doing a heavy dry brush, so I'm not doing a thick coverage. I liked that wood grain and even the different colors coming through, but I definitely wanted it more on the white side. So that's what I'm doing. But of course, remember with all of these, you can do these in any colors that you want. I am going over it with some Mod Podge to seal in that paint so that it doesn't scrape off on me. But use any frame. You can do this with any size frame as well, or shaped item. But this is what I was using. I did pick out this frame for this DIY in mind to make sure it was the right size for what I wanted to do with it, but there's always variety. Now for my paper, I'm using these file folders from the Dollar Tree. I had picked them up because I thought the pattern on them was super cute, but you could just paint the back of something. You could use some scrapbook paper, whatever you want. And then we're using these little mirrored house stickers from the Dollar Tree. They also have them in like cactuses and butterflies, all sorts of really cute things. And I'm just centering it on the paper, and I think I do end up, yeah, I do end up using the glass because it's not super thick. And make sure you peel the little, there's a little plastic piece over the mirror tile. You want to take that off so that you get that glossy look. And it's a really cute, it's kind of hard to get a good shot of this because it is mirrored. So there's all of the reflection going on, but just a really cute sign. I love the idea of having some signs that don't all have words on them. So I loved this. All right, so for this one, we were using this little house piece. This was from Hobby Lobby. I bought it on clearance, way marked down, but you will find similar things at Dollar Tree as well. And these flower stickers from the Dollar Tree. So these have a pretty good stickiness to them, but I am going to use some hot glue just to make sure that it stays on. And we're just going to glue these all over the front of the house, just in whatever design that you want. You could also just do this on a sign if you don't have one of the house shaped pieces. The same concept would work on other shapes, obviously. And now we're going to just go in and give a good coat of white Waverly chalk paint. I actually do 2 coats. I do get the edges as well, even though they're already white, but just so that everything kind of looks cohesive and we have the same shades and finishes and all of that. So I'm trying to do a really good coverage, get around all of the edges, but then wipe away any excess so that it's not like goopy and globby. Are those proper like crafting terms? We don't want any globs of paint around the edges of the flowers. So once that's all dry, we're going to mix some Waverly chalk paint in the color Celery with some Waverly wax. Now I am mixing it with this to tint it because I only have the clear wax, but I'm learning that that's not totally a bad thing because you can just mix it with paint and give you a tinted color. Now I'm just going to mix this all together, go in with a stencil brush and really go in and work in all of those grooves around the flowers. Wanted to add some more wax in here. And I kind of forgot when I first started doing this that I'm going to brush it on and wipe it off, but ultimately I remembered before I was done. But we're going to really emphasize the ridges on the flowers, but then I am going to go in with a little bit across the whole thing, including the sides, just to bring that color in throughout the whole thing. And then we're going to go in with a paper towel and like buff off and wipe off the excess on the whole thing, but really on the flowers. So what you're kind of left with is that color in the grooves, and it really just helps them stand out and pop. And I just love how this looks. And again, this is like a piece with some detail, but it's also a neutral piece with like no words on it because I love words, but I feel like I have so many things with the words. And I love this will just be a great little shelf filler piece. And then once again, I'm going in with some Mod Podge because I just like to coat everything with Mod Podge. And that is all that there is for this one. I love how it came out. I think it's really pretty. Moving on, I have this frame, which I picked up from a thrift store, and I believe I paid 25 cents for it. We're just going to give this a good sanding. We want to rough up because it was the finish that was on it. I felt like the paint might be hard to adhere to it. So I just wanted to sand it. And this one does have a couple little like layers in it. So I sanded all of those edges, wiped it down to get the dust off. And once again, I'm going in with some Waverly chalk paint in the color white. I only do one coat of the white paint because I decided to actually go with another color, but I was glad I have a little bit of a white base, and you will see why as we go along. But of course, you can use any color that you want. And now I'm going to go in with Waverly chalk paint in the color celery, and we're going to paint this whole thing, and I do give it 2 coats of the celery. I do end up painting the back of the frame as well, but I don't share that with you in the video, but I did want to make sure it looked finished, and that I figured that like reddish wood would really stand out if someone were to see the back of the frame. So I did paint that as well. And I painted the kind of inside rim because I knew that you'd be able to see that as well when we put it all back together. So once that was fully dry, I'm going in with my sanding block and I'm going to rough it up a little bit. And I'm really focusing on all of these little edges, and you can see the wood through it in some places. In some, you just got that white layer of paint. So I was glad that I had put the white paint underneath just so that there was kind of layers in the colors, if that makes sense. So I just kept sanding till I had the look I wanted. And then I just took a scrapbook piece of paper from like a pack I had that I didn't care for this particular print that much. And I'm using the back because it's just a solid white and it was a thicker paper. And I'm just going to cut that out to fit the glass. And we're going to put that frame back together with the white paper facing the front. We're going to go in with these rub-on transfers. These are so cute from Dollar Tree. And I just cut out the pieces that I wanted to use. And I'm just using a popsicle stick to rub that on. And you can also use your finger or, different tools, whatever. And you just want to make sure that you peel it off slowly so that if some of the print is coming off, you can just lay it back down and rub on it a little bit more. Now, I did have a little bit of problem on one letter at the end. The transfer just moved a little bit. You can see that R is missing some. So I went in with a Sharpie. I tried using my fine tip Sharpie, but it was kind of out of ink, or mostly out of ink, so it was not working. So I very, very carefully went in with a regular size Sharpie and just kind of filled in the gaps there, and it actually worked pretty good. The fine tip one would have been a lot easier, but this did the trick ultimately. Or if you have a paint pen, that would work as well, but you can't even tell. Now, I wanted to go in with some more of that wax because I already had some of the clear wax tinted with the white. So I was like, you know what? That would be really pretty on this frame as well. So I did the same thing, rubbing it on and then like buffing it out and emphasized kind of the edges and just the texture of the frame. And I really liked how this kind of completed the look. And that's all I did for this one. I think this came out really cute. I love the transfers just on the glass with the bright white background. Yeah, love how that one came out. And for our last DIY, I have this charger. This was another Hobby Lobby Easter clearance find, but obviously it's not really Eastery. But Dollar Tree also has chargers, but I love this one. It's like a wooden, I don't know if it's actually wood, but it's a wooden texture and feel. And it was already that pretty like rustic-y white. It's like white, but a little bit chippy. And I took this stencil that is from Dollar Tree. They came out with some really cute new stencils. And I am taping this down. I'm also really paying attention to the corners, taping it down because this is not a sticky stencil. And so it will kind of come up. It's very flexible. So I painted down the edges and then I'm going to use some black acrylic paint and this little sponge pouncer brush. And the key for this stencil, I was really worried because I did not want to mess up this charger because I thought it was so cute, is to not have too much paint on your sponge and to take your time. I mean, this video is sped up, so take your time with it and just don't put too much paint on. You can always go back and do a little bit more if you need to. And just go straight up and down. You don't want to bump the stencil at all. Like I said, these stencils are not sticky. They're not even really very firm, but I didn't have any problem with bleed through. So just take your time, straight up and down, and don't use too much paint. And we're going to peel it off. I wanted to kind of show the reveal because I was super excited about the reveal. I was a little nervous, but it came out perfect. I love this stencil on this charger, and this is just a great little decor piece. All right, so for my first DIY, I've got these 3 little metal buckets. I picked these up at a thrift store for like, it was either $1 or 50 cents. I don't remember, but for the 3 of them, great price, but you can get them at like craft stores and Dollar Tree and stuff like that. And we're going to dry brush this with some Waverly chalk paint in the color white to start out with. And what I'm doing with mine is I am doing a couple coats and letting it thoroughly dry in between. So I wanted more coverage, but I still wanted it to look sparse, so I just did a little bit at a time. And now I'm going in and doing the same thing with some black paint, and I did that also with just a dry brush, not doing a full coverage here. And then once that was dry, I went back in with a little bit more white paint because I definitely wanted it to be brighter and lighter, but I wanted the old rustic look, which honestly these tins were kind of old and rustic when I bought them from the thrift store, but nonetheless. And sorry the lighting keeps changing in the video. I was doing it different times of day and the sun coming in and out and all that stuff. So now I'm just taking some of the green floral foam from the Dollar Tree. This is the stuff that's like more flexible, and I think you can use with water if you're using actual like real flowers. And I just cut that into pieces and I'm putting it down in the tin. It's fit really perfect where it was nice and snug, but you can kind of smush in the corners to get it down in there. And then I'm taking these succulents that I picked up from the Dollar Tree as well as these rocks. And the styrofoam helped keep it from me needing to use like tons of rocks, which was a great filler. And I just did that for all 3 and then pushed the succulents all the way down once I had the rocks in. And I think this is really cute. A nice little set. Of course, you could just do one of them, but I had the set of 3 and I thought that was fun. All right, so for this next one, I've got this sign that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I think I got it for under $1. It was on clearance. I always look for these types of things and get them super cheap, but Dollar Tree often has signs similar in size. And I'm just going to trace and cut out some scrapbook paper to attach to the front of this. And I'm going to use a Gorilla glue stick. I love this glue stick. I think I picked it up at Marshall's. And then we're going to adhere this on. Now this DIY is actually to be using the faux leather from Dollar Tree. I was so excited that I found it. So I smoothed out the paper and used a sanding block to kind of trim off the edges, so to speak. And I'm going to cut out a piece of this faux leather that fits the stencil that I'm planning on using. So that's why I have the stencil on there. And I'm just going to trace out a piece and cut it out. And now I just used some masking tape to hold it on. And I'm going to mix some black and brown paint here, just some apple barrel paint by Plaid that I have, and I'm going to stencil it. You do got to hold the stencil on, you know, you don't want any bleed through, so holding it on and also not having too much paint on your brush will make all the difference in the world. Take your time. This video is quite sped up, so I just put a little bit of paint on the brush, dabbed it off on a paper towel, and continued until I had the stencil all on there. And it actually came out really good. I did not have any bleed through, and I thought it came out cute. So once that's dry, we're going to attach this to our sign, and I'm going to use some hot glue. Kind of wish I had used the glue stick, but I wasn't positive if it was strong enough, but I think the Gorilla glue stick would have been. The hot glue worked great, but you want to make sure you don't have too much, otherwise it will be a like bumpy piece around the edge. But anyways, I went ahead and hot glued around the whole thing. For a little added detail, I am using these little, I painted these actually for a previous DIY that I never ended up using them on, but there were those little like iridescent, is that the right word? Button type stickers from Dollar Tree, and I just painted them and hot glued them on. It just looks like some like nails or hardware in there. And I love how this came out really quick and easy to do, but super cute.
All right, well, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.